The jaw side of it, what I would probably do first, probably dust this top side first, and when we set this down on our chuck, magnetic chuck, okay, there's a very little holding power there, right? So anytime we're on a chuck, let's just go over here. I cleaned it off good and I turn on my magnet. It's held pretty good. Depending on the magnetic chuck, similar to that chuck, that magnetic chuck is going to hold differently than this one because of the spacing of the bars, okay? But when we do this, we want to block this in, and notice I've kind of put it at a little angle, all right? I suggest putting things at a little angle, that way when you're grinding across, the heat doesn't stay in the part. If we're grinding straight across like this, our wheel, the surface area is more, so our heat is staying in that. So you want to try to put it at a little bit of an angle. Anytime we can do that, that will create less heat inside the part and let it escape. But you want to make sure you block that in because we have very little on there. Once again, if I would hold it,
yeah, you got that straight. You're not crossing any of these.
If I hold this straight, you know, I can move it around pretty freely. So that's another reason why we want to put that at a little bit of an angle. Okay, once you've got this surface ground, then we can go ahead and I'm gonna grab a couple of those bars. So these are the blocks you can use to block parts in. We want to go ahead and set our part on there, make sure it's clean, deburred, and we want to indicate this little ledge in, or this step right here, and we want to make sure that we block this in. Now notice how I have this sitting. If I have it sitting like this and I block it in, okay, I have a tendency to, when I push on this, it's going to push that up. So what I suggest is you make sure that you have this sitting like so, block that in, and then you have less of a tendency to let that part come up, and we can just very carefully come up and lightly touch that surface, indicate it in, and then we can go ahead and turn our magnet on. Does everybody understand the process there and why we're doing what we're doing? Okay. When we're grinding this surface, or these two surfaces, I would go ahead, make sure that you have a good sharp wheel. If your wheel's dull, you're not going to be able to grind up to, and you don't need to grind the sides, you just need to grind the bottom. So you're going to have to be careful about going back and forth and not bumping these sides. Okay, and then you can go ahead and just dust the tops of the bottom portions that sit on the jaw. Everybody good there? Good. All right, so at that point, you would check squareness. I'm going to go over here. If you think about how this vise works, a lot of people will set this down and check it for squareness here, but is that the important feature on our jaw? It's not. The important feature is this surface to this surface. So how am I going to check that for squareness? I'm going to have to set it down like this and check from that bottom surface to here. Okay, it doesn't, these two surfaces don't really matter, but we grind them because it will help us later on in the process. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so when you're checking that, make sure we do that. At that point, then you can go ahead and either can twist this, is what I would recommend. You're going to have to can twist it something like this. Indicate one side in, something like so. Can twist this up. Dust that surface. If you get that surface good, then you can go ahead and slap it down, not slap it, but set it down, dust that surface. And the last surface is this one. This one's not important as far as grinding, but we grind it for the reason that you're going to have a washer here and it's going to need to slide. So with that angled surface, really all that's necessary is clamp it to an angle plate like so, indicate it in, and just dust it clean. Anybody have any questions? No? Everybody good?
Are we, is this coming later, but are we putting it on there to grind them together as one piece?
These two?
Yeah.
You want this to be smaller than your body. Because that way, a lot of times what you will do is you will clamp this into a vise. Well, if this is smaller, then you can still take parts in and out. So we ultimately, it doesn't have to be much smaller, but it needs to be slightly smaller than the body. Okay. The other thing is some of your jaws will not fit on here like this because they've warped or whatever the case is. When somebody's ready, I will show how we can grind inside this slot to get the jaw to fit. I'm not going to go over that now because most people forget by the time they actually have to do it. So when somebody's ready to do that, we'll go over it at that point.